Hi, I'm Soraya Mia. This is AWANI Tonight. 71% of contributors to the Employees Provident Fund EPF, aged 55 and below, will struggle to retire above the poverty line. Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, who is also Finance Minister, said this was due to the 4 special withdrawals approved during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The number of active EPF members who reached the basic savings target of 240,000 ringgit had reduced from 36% in 2020 to 29% as of the end of last year. According to Anwar, the EPF estimates that members are now required to work between 4 to 6 more years to rebuild the savings they withdrew during the pandemic. As of December 31st last year, up to 6.7 million members aged under 55 had less than 10,000 ringgit left in their accounts. This would leave them with retirement savings of less than 42 ringgit a month for the next 20 years.
A bill on climate change, due to be tabled in the Dewan Rakyat early this year, has been postponed. Environment and Climate Change Minister Nik Nazmi Dik Ahmad said the development of the bill will need up to 2 to 3 years before it can be tabled.
Nik Nazmi told Parliament today that his ministry is in its early stages of developing the National Climate Change Bill. According to him, the bill will adopt a whole-of-nation approach, including engaging with relevant stakeholders. He was responding to Bentong MP Yang Shafura Othman from DAP, who asked the government to explain its direction in drawing up the law on national climate change. The bill was supposed to be finalised at the end of 2022 and tabled in Parliament this year, Nik Nazmi's predecessor, Datuk Sri Tuan Ibrahim Tuan Man, said last September.
Separately, Nik Nazmi told the Dewan Rakyat that electricity tariff subsidies for households in the top 20 group should be reviewed. He said Malaysia must move to targeted electric subsidies and that the T20 group can afford to pay a more competitive tariff. He also said his ministry will propose fairer and better tariff rates for utility companies affected by increases in tariff surcharges for high and medium voltage non-domestic users. According to him, Malaysia can no longer afford to continue subsidizing corporations, especially those reaping huge profits. In other news, the government has no plans to vet or censor mobile applications or social media platforms. Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fazil said his ministry does not intend to introduce any licenses for instant messaging platforms such as WhatsApp and WeChat.
Walau bagaimanapun, bagi aplikasi yang secara jelas melanggar peruntukan undang-undang yang seperti membuat penipuan, penyamaran dan sebagainya, tindakan sewajarnya boleh diambil termasuk dengan menyekat aplikasi berkenaan daripada diguna oleh pengguna di Malaysia.
Fahmi added that legal action could be taken against any party or individual responsible for uploading content that violated the law, rather than the platform provider. He also revealed the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, had established 911 digital economy centres nationwide to allow more youths in rural areas to make use of social media for creative work.
Malaysia suffered over 600 million ringgit in losses from floods last year, with over 80% losses suffered by Terengganu, Kelantan and Pahang alone. The Department of Statistics Malaysia revealed this today, adding that the losses were lower in comparison to 6.1 billion ringgit in 2021.
The special report on the impact of floods in Malaysia 2022 stated that the 622.4 million ringgit losses include public assets and infrastructure at over 230 million ringgit, followed by losses related to living quarters, 157 million ringgit, agriculture, 155 million ringgit, business premises at 50 million ringgit, vehicles almost 19 million ringgit, and 8.7 million ringgit on manufacturing. The heaviest flood losses last year, according to states, were in Terengganu at some 200 million ringgit and Kelantan 150 million ringgit, which collectively come up to nearly 60% combined. The third hardest hit state was Pahang, which suffered 144 million ringgit in losses from floods last year. These were followed by Kedah at 30.8 million ringgit, Selangor 25.5 million ringgit, and Negeri Sembilan 21 million ringgit. The Department of Statistics said the data for this report came from a special survey conducted from January 8 to December 31st, 2022.
Meanwhile, electoral watchdog Bersih has called on the Election Commission to announce the dates for 6 state elections early for a higher voter turnout. The group said this would allow voters to make arrangements early to travel and return to their hometowns to vote.
Bersih projected lower voter turnouts of between 50% and 60% for the state elections, claiming voters largely viewed them as of lesser importance. This in turn would cause the outcome in many marginal constituencies to be affected by small margins, which will also affect the legitimacy of the new state governments, the group said. It suggested for one common polling date for the 6 states and that it should be announced 6 months in advance. To do so, Negeri Sembilan, Selangor, Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu governments must agree to complete their full terms, while Penang agrees to dissolve its state assembly earlier. Yesterday, the 6 states' leaders announced that they would be dissolving their respective state assemblies in the last 2 weeks of June.
More after the break. Stay with us.
New Catador Fondant au Beurre and Cafe Latte Brownie with Australian almonds in rich butter fudge ice cream and Italian chocolate pieces in Cafe Latte ice cream, bringing unforgettable and elevated moments at home. Now available in 2 new flavors.
The public healthcare system has come under the spotlight recently, with healthcare capacity stretched and workers overwhelmed and dissatisfied. Can the upcoming budget provide meaningful reforms for them? We ask public health expert Dr. Farhan Rusli for his thoughts.
We can't expect too much from it. I think one of the key takeaways that we have to note here is that anything that is given through this budget is going to be very short-term and is a stopgap measures that they can do. I think on the pretext of it, a lot of the budget is going to go into medication purchase or pharmaceuticals. It has always been that way. But what improvements can be done if there is actually an increase in the budget, do not increase the amount that you actually give to purchasing of pharmaceuticals, rather spend on the ability for you to prevent disease from occurring. Now, this is something which is really important because there's no point in you buying more medicines, but you're not stopping the disease itself in its tracks. And when you don't stop disease in its tracks, no amount of beds, no amount of hospitals, and no amount of medications is actually going to be enough. At one point, you'll have overcrowding, but you're not solving the problem at the base, which is the key point, is stopping the disease from progression.
Amid calls to increase the public healthcare budget to 5% of the GDP, Farhan stressed the role of the health minister in lobbying for immediate and tangible reforms.
A lot of our house officers, medical officers are still sleeping in the pantries. They're still sleeping in changing rooms. They're sleeping on chairs, on plastic chairs. They're eating while they stand. A lot of our Muslim doctors don't pray 5 times a day because they just don't have time, you know. So it's come to that point where you start thinking, at what point do we actually get to push them before they actually break? And I think the breaking point is so close. That's why people are even up to the level whereby they say, you know what? As much as I love being a doctor, I love the patients, I don't mind actually just walking out of my workplace so that I can prove a point telling you that this is something that you need to pay close attention and be very serious with. But like I said, I'm not going to be putting too much hope on the healthcare budget. Everybody will say that they need more money. Now, the onus is who can actually justify where the money is worth to be placed into. And I think this is the key takeaway. I think this is the job of the Minister of Health, to actually tell people and to actually tell the cabinet that why is my ministry the priority? Why are my doctors the priority? And if she can actually make the cabinet see the long-term game here, then the budget will come to her. If not, then I guess we're not going to see any meaningful change in the next budget table.
We also look at other fields that require attention in the upcoming budget. Among them, gender issues within the labour sector. Many women were forced to leave the workforce to care for their families during the pandemic and have been slow to return. Aini Hazika of Muda speaks on providing more opportunities for women to participate in the workforce and contribute to the economy in Budget 2023.
This recovery year of 2023, the government should also allocate a big sum or a big fund for the recovery of women in businesses and also economy. It also includes women who are in the range of B40 and M40, because we know for sure that they do not have a lot of capacity to recover from such a long period of pandemic. So I think it's also very much important that initiatives that the government, especially the ministry in charge, would to put forward are the initiatives that can actually help them upgrade or start again their businesses. And also, of course, for women who are planning to go back to work after a long break during the pandemic, such initiatives by the government should be supporting employers, employing back again women who are going back to work, and also, of course, those who wanting to stay in work. What kind of initiatives that the government can provide to support both employer and employees, especially for women?
Aini also calls for more initiatives towards childcare, noting that most women are still the primary caregivers in their households.
And we all know that the percentage is very high that women are mostly the child carers. The parents who are ill, they are the carers. Women are the carers. So if, let's say, we're talking about better initiatives other than the tax exemptions, for example, is for the government to look into childcare. I think this is very important because it can actually take away the burden from women who are actually are the ones who are taking care of their children and sick parents, for example. So if the government can come out with a very good initiative on how to ensure that the child carers are actually properly systematically put on, then women can actually go back to workforce and they can actually contribute to the country, the economy of the country.
On to international news. The Israeli army launched airstrikes on targets in the Gaza Strip earlier today. This comes hours after Palestinian fighters fired rockets towards Israel's south in response to a raid in the occupied West Bank that killed 11.
The attacks early on Thursday sent plumes of black smoke rising over one of the targeted locations north of Gaza City. The Palestinian Health Ministry said those killed by the Israeli army in the city of Nablus were aged between 16 and 72. Meanwhile, more than 80 Palestinians suffered gunshot wounds in what the Israeli army called a counter-terrorism operation. United Nations Antonio Guterres earlier urged efforts to prevent escalation and expressed concerns over Israelis' retaliatory actions against the Palestinian National Authority. The Nablus raid was one of the deadliest Israeli operations since 2005, with the death toll surpassing that of an Israeli attack last month in the city of Jenin.
Over in China, the death toll from a mine collapse in Inner Mongolia has risen to 5 people, while 48 others are still missing. In Wednesday's incident, dozens were trapped when a 180-meter-high slope gave way at the open pit mine. Hundreds of rescue workers were dispatched to the remote site, but another landslide later that day halted efforts to save those trapped beneath the rubble. Rescuers have since resumed their work today. It is not yet clear what caused the slope at the mine to give way. Coal is a major source of energy in China, but its mines are among the world's deadliest. This is largely due to lax enforcement of safety standards, despite repeated government orders for improvements in safety over the years. That ends the show tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Soraya Mia, and we'll see you soon.